Hello, this is Jim with DC Digital, and today I have a network interfaced. It's a counter, and specifically, it's going to be used in a powder coating facility, whereas it's going to count the hangers that the parts are going to be put on and put through their process, and it's basically a web page with a display for the local web page for supervision for the supervisors, and then local control for incrementing and decrementing the number of parts, and then also a sensor there locally to look at what they call a jig, and the jig may have one or more points where the sensor is it's going to break the beam on the sensor. So basically the sensor is going to be counting the jig and and you input the number of breaks, beam breaks, and that will also report back to the web page how many parts on that jig, and then calculate up the number of parts, and then give you a total number of parts that are running on the conveyor. And so this is a DC-40, so it's a 4-inch high LED, and it has terminal blocks on the back so you can bring your cabling into and terminate it, and we give it several points where you can bring conduit in if you want to. And then we have two 40mm palm switches with a 60mm palm switch, and then there's separate enclosures. Whereas you can decrement by one part, you can increment by one part, or you can just increment this is the number of beam breaks on your jig, which also coincides with your beam break for your sensor. And right now I've got it set up for one beam break for one part. And I'll go through and show you how to change that, the beam break to part ratio through the web page. So to get that web page, you need to go to our website if you don't have the program already. And it's a program called IP Setup. And we have a page for that. You can just go up here in the search bar and type in, oh, no, I want to type in type in IP and then SETUP setup. And that will do a search for IP setup program, and here it is. It's just it's a zip file, and so you download the zip file and then open it up, extract it, put it on your desktop, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. So this is the IP setup program right here, and then you would find this specific paint lines, what we call it, paint line counter. This program has been developed for a powder coater, but this program can be used for any types of parts counts on a conveyor belt, and be able to report it back through a web page. Nice thing about a web page is that it's universal. You don't need Microsoft or Apple to view it. It's just any device can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that and open that web page. So I'm going to launch that web page, and I'm showing 23 parts right off the bat. Okay, so this specific job has 23 parts already run on it. And I'm going to go to show you, now this is the home screen, so this is home. And this shows you up to 10 jobs. So you can set up 10 jobs and click on that job and then have it set up and be ready to count the number and give you the number of parts per job. But you have to input that job first. So if you want your first job, we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to say setup job. So we're going to say setup job number 1. Okay, so they call it jig, we call it jig. The jig is what they're putting the parts onto. So we're going to say there's, let's just say there's 5 parts on that jig, okay? And then we have beam brakes here. So right now it's set for 1, that is default. So we're going to say it's a pretty big part, so we need 2. It's a big jig, so you're going to need 2 beam brakes. And then it'll give you how many parts should be on a skid or in a box. And so we'll just say for right now, we'll say 20. Okay, so that job number 1 is set up. To put it into memory, go ahead and hit job setup. Okay, and that's job setup 1, which you have total for job setup 1 up here. And on this line you have parts per jig 5, and then beam brakes per part 2, and then parts per skid or box we have 20. So I'm going to go ahead and simulate that. So I'm going to simulate the jig going by. So there's the first beam brake, and there's the second. And you see 5 on your local display and then 5 on your web page. Now let's say one of those jigs only has 4. So the operator would press the decrement, which is the black button, and there's 4, okay? And it will keep that. So we're going to do another 2 beam brakes. 1 and then 2. Now we have 9, total of 9, okay? Now let's say we want to add a jig, and we don't want to have a beam brake, so we're going to go ahead and hit this button twice because you need 2. This is identical to this 60mm palm switch is identical to your beam brakes. So if you have 4 beam brakes, then you're going to have 4 pushes. So we got 14 on this one. Okay, very good. 14 actual parts that we've run so far. So I'm going to do 2 more beam brakes, and then so on and so forth until we're done with the job. Okay, so we're done with that job. We have 24 parts. So I'm going to go back. I want to get, okay, well, we're going to start another job. So I'm going to do job number 2. I'm going to set that one up. This time we're going to have 10 parts. It's going to be 2 beam brakes also, and then it'll be 100 in a box. Okay, so I'm going to say job setup number 2. I'm going to send it to job setup number 2. Starts at 0. We have parts per jig, we have 10. We have beam brakes per part of just 2. It requires 2 beam brakes. And then there's going to be 100 of them in a box. Now if you look down here to the right, you see your last job, which was job setup number 1. And total of parts was 24. And then you've got completed. I'll scroll her down here. So completed 1 box, and then 4 left over, loose parts. So as you remember, we have 20 parts per box, and then so there's 4 should be loose parts left over. And your last job will always show up in the furthest right column. So right now we're showing no parts. Okay, 2 beam brakes gives me 10 parts, and then you need 100 parts in a box. I'm going to do 2 beam brakes, and there's our 10 parts. We get it here on this display, this web page. We also get it locally, and everybody's happy. So again, there is the web. You have to have your internet connected over there, your Ethernet connected. It connects to power is a wall transformer with a 6-foot cord and a coaxial cable off to the right of the enclosure. It's all aluminum enclosure. It can be hung on a 2x4 or a 4x4 box, and you know, you're set to go. All of our switches come with, if you buy them from us, come in a weatherproof box, stainless steel cover, and 25 feet of cabling, and that's on the switches. The sensor has a 6-foot cable, and we don't add more cable to it because we don't really know. And people, you know, you can buy that cabling from us, but you know, we don't know how many feet you're going to need, so just let us know. So again, this is Jim with DC Digital, and this is the DC-40 with Webpage parts counter. This is used for powder coater. It could be used for any type of parts counting where you're doing so many parts per unit or per jig, or and then parts in a box, and it gives you 10 reports back, and just to kind of keep everybody all on the same page, and let you know that you know, the number of parts that has been processed or been produced or been manufactured. So again, this is Jim with DC Digital, and thank you for watching.